I'm Jessica Roy. I'm so sorry. I'm just making sure that we're connected here before I launch into my thing. Okay. Hi. Sorry about that. I'm Jessica Roy. Welcome to We Can Teach You That, a new virtual series hosted by the Los Angeles Times. What we're doing with We Can Teach You That is doing practical skills where you can learn from Times experts, people who are journalists, editors, writers, reporters, photographers, and learn real life skills from the comfort of your home. So what we're going to start with is I'm going to share an extremely cool PowerPoint presentation with you. Share my screen real quick. There we go. Okay, so like I said, this is We Can Teach You That. And tonight we're talking about staying connected with family and friends. First, we are going to talk more about a very important subject, me. My name is Jessica Roy, and I'm an assistant editor on the new utility team here at the LA Times. Prior to this, I worked for 5 years on our audience engagement team, doing social media and helping bring our journalism to a wider audience online. I've also worked really closely with our features and lifestyle team, which has become really important in the last 7, 8, however long we've been in the pandemic. Very important, a new and different kind of lifestyle under these conditions. So here's some of my work that you might be familiar with over the past few months. I've written about when we can see friends. I've written about how to fly. I've written about how much I love working from home, which I still do and am doing right now. Relaxing, and also the etiquette of social distancing. And another thing I've written a lot about, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, is how to get together with your friends online and how to do it in a way that it's actually fun. We're going to talk about these topics of discussion tonight. We're going to start with your options for connecting, the different tools that you can use to get together online. We're going to talk about how to get set up for success. So how to make it as fun and as good as possible from a technological point of view. And we're also going to talk about how to know when to sign off from these events. We're going to talk about different types of gathering ideas. We're going to talk about ones that are discussion-based. We're going to talk about ones that are activity-based. And then we're going to talk about ones that are more relaxing. And you'll see what I mean by that. If you do get together with people in person, we're going to talk about how to do that safely and also how to say no. And then we are going to talk about ideas for the holidays because we are right on the cusp of the holiday season. First, we're going to do a poll question real quick. If you could pull that up for me, Liza. I'm interested to know from all of you, what are the ways you've stayed connected with other people during COVID? And this is one where you can choose as many as apply. So there's phone calls, emails, social media, one-way things like FaceTime or Skype, and group video calls like Zoom or Google Hangouts. And so based on what everyone's responses to this are, I'm going to sort of tailor the presentation around that, around what everyone's skill level is. You can only see this poll and participate if you're connected to us through the webinar. If you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, you won't be able to see it. But I'm going to talk about what all the answers are. And so we're all going to get to be part of the discussion. Before we dive in, I wanted to talk about the importance of connecting and why we're doing this. I know that having Thanksgiving dinner over Zoom is not the same as having it in person. It's not the same as sitting on the couch together. It's not the same as hugging each other. And I think you kind of reach a point where it's like, well, it's not the same at all. And so why bother doing it? And I just want to tell you how important it is to do it. Something that a public health expert told me in my reporting early on that's really stuck with me is that this is temporary. I know it seems like this pandemic's been going on forever, and it is still going on much longer than anyone thought it would or than it really should have. But we have 2 really promising vaccines on the horizon, and everything's really, really hard right now. And I just think it's really important to stay connected to each other in whatever way we can for when this does end. And so with that in mind, let's talk about, Liza, could we see those poll results, please? And if you'll excuse me, I am just looking over on my other screen where I can see them. And so let's see, 88% of you have used phone calls, 62% have used emails, 40% social media, 34% one-way video calls, and 65% of you have used things like Zoom and Google Hangouts. And so let's dive into what some of our options are. So let's talk about one-way calls. So things like FaceTime or Google Duo or apps. These work best for one-to-one calls where you're just talking to one other person. FaceTime is for Apple devices, and so if you've got an iPhone or an iPad, it's already an app on there. And then Google Duo is in your Google App Store. It's the free version of that. Things like Google Hangouts and Skype, they work for one-to-one calls or group calls. Both of them are free. Up to 10 people can join a Skype, and up to 25 people can join a Google Hangout. And then what we are broadcasting this webinar on is Zoom. It's free for up to 3 people or meetings of any size for up to 40 minutes, except for on Thanksgiving Day. They're actually making it free for any size group all day, which is really great. So you could definitely do Thanksgiving Zoom. Apart from Thanksgiving, if you want to do more bigger meetings, longer meetings, it's $14.99 a month. And if you look here, this is me and my coworkers on it. I'm down in the bottom right there. Hi, guys. So let's talk about getting set up for success. Part of the problem with video calls is that suddenly you're way too close to the camera, or you're way too far back, or the lighting's all wrong. I used to be a producer on a show that actually used Google Hangouts to bring in guests. And so I'm an expert at telling people how to look better. Right now I have a ring light pointed at me. I have my monitor up. Let's talk about some of the advice here. So you don't want light behind you. So you see my light there is turned off. If it's on, it's like the sun is behind me, and that's bad. What you want is light behind where your camera is. So I've got a ring light right there. I've got another light turned on over there. You want the lights toward you, not toward the camera, because it's going to wash you out and make it hard to see you. Another thing is the height of the camera. So if you're using your phone to talk to somebody on something like FaceTime, it's easier versus holding it up to sort of prop it up on books. So I use like a stack of books and I put my laptop on there. You want the camera about eye level. So you can see I'm sitting up, looking forward, and I'm looking right at you. That's where the camera should be, like that's where the other person is. Framing is so important. You don't want to be all super close to the person, and you don't want to be so far back that they can't even like see what you're saying really. You want to be like this, mid-chest to just above your head. So like this, like you're framed, like you're taking a nice portrait, mid-chest, above the head. And in terms of camera quality, whatever webcam you have is fine. The phone that's the camera that is on your laptop computer or a separate webcam is going to be a better quality camera than what's on your phone, and the internet connection is going to be more stable, which is going to make the video quality better. Overall, it's just a better experience if you're not dealing with fuzzy video or people cutting in and out. It's just a lot better, I have found, and really sets you up for success in a different way to make it all feel more natural. And then when you are with groups, smaller is better. I know if you've got something like a Zoom or a Google Hangout, it's tempting to send the link to everyone you've ever heard of and say, we're all just going to get together for Zoom Thanksgiving. But the problem is then you end up with 100 little tiny boxes on the screen, and you can't really carry on a conversation. If you had a party for everyone you've ever known, everybody would break off into different conversations. They'd have little side groups, and it'd be more natural. You wouldn't all sit around in a group of 100. And so smaller is better for these kind of online gatherings. You really have to kind of pick and choose. I've also found that using the mute button on Zoom is really helpful, especially if you're doing something like we're all going to bake together and you're all, opening the oven and clanging pots and pans around. Don't be afraid to mute yourself. Very powerful tool. And then with Zoom specifically, which, like I said, a lot more people have been using during the pandemic to connect as we are now, gallery view works better than speaker view. So here is an example. If you look on the left, that is speaker view. That is where only the person talking is the big picture, and then everyone else is a little tiny box at the top. And that's kind of disorienting unless there's one person, say, presenting an extremely cool PowerPoint about Zooms. On the right, you've got gallery view. That feels a lot more natural. Everybody's in the same size box. Just feels right. This part is so important, and I really want to underscore this. Don't overstay your digital welcome. Most people max out on Zoom around like the 60 to 90 minute mark. And the bigger the group is, the shorter the activity should be. And so if you do want to do, everybody gets together on Thanksgiving and there's going to be 45 people on the Zoom, it should be a toast. It should be a quick toast and then y'all log off. But if it's just dinner with 2 or 3 other households who are all on Zoom, that one you could go a little longer. Something that's so important that we're going to talk about tonight is activities and objectives for these gatherings. I noticed early on in the pandemic, a lot of people were throwing like Zoom happy hours and Google Hangout get-togethers and stuff, and those kind of fell off really fast. And part of the reason why that is because it doesn't feel natural. I mean, if you think about what did you and your friends do prior to the pandemic, it was not, hey, everybody come over and let's all sit around and stare at each other for a while. And just hope some conversation pops up where we're all just speaking one at a time. There were things that you did. And so planning activities and objectives for these calls is going to give you a natural endpoint to say, all right, everybody, time to sign off. This brings us to our next poll question, if we could get those, Liza. Before the pandemic, I want to know what everyone's favorite way was to get together with their friends. There are things like book clubs, dinner parties, going out to eat, outdoor activities like walking or hiking, indoor activities, things like bowling or those painting parties, or going to the movies. And then we're going to circle back on that if everyone wants to take a minute to answer. Okay, so we are connected. Our camera is at eye height. Our ring lights are pointed in the appropriate direction. Now what? I read a super interesting article recently in Vox called What is Fun? And is it possible to have fun in quarantine? And she talked to experts on fun, people who've studied play and games, to say why is Zooming with my friends less fun than hanging out with my friends? Why is going to a book reading on Zoom different from going to a book reading in person? And I want to highlight this quote that one of the experts said. They said, for the maximum 10 out of 10 fun experience, you need to be both totally absorbed in the pleasure of the thing you're doing and released from some sort of prior psychological restriction, like a social obligation or your own self-discipline. And that is tricky to do, especially when it is just all of you staring at each other in a massive Zoom. I also loved the article because they quoted the LA Times from November 3rd, 1918, an article called What You Doing With Yourself, asking everybody what they were doing during the last major pandemic. A lot of the answers sounded very familiar. It was kids were playing outside, teens were having picnics and inviting too many people and, quote, too much holding hands. People were reading books, people were playing golf, everybody got really into fortune telling. That was their sourdough bread. And then the 1918 version of the run on the Peloton bike was that you couldn't get a phonograph anywhere or a player piano. People talked so much on the phone that the Los Angeles Times ran an ad begging people to stop talking on the phone because it was tying up the phone lines. I am very glad. I'm not glad to live in a pandemic, to be totally clear, but I am glad to live in a time where we can all call each other as much as we want and we are not clogging up the phone lines. Let's talk about those poll results, Liza, if we could see those. Okay. 59% going out to eat, very popular. 15% dinner parties, 14% outdoor activities, 3% book club, 3% indoor activities, and 7% going to the movies. And so if you look at all these activities and think about what they have in common, it's that there was an objective and that you did stuff and there was a start and an end, which is why we are going to start to talk about some of those same things. So we're going to start with discussions. These are some things that I've done a ton of during the pandemic. They just take it's just a level up from saying, let's all get on the Zoom and hang out. Something like a dinner or a cocktail party just feels a lot more natural to have that kind of rhythm of eating and you're not looking at the camera the whole time and you're getting up to get more food or get a refill on your drink. And it gives you something to look at and something to do in a way that just feels a lot better for everyone, I think. And then something me and my friends actually do almost every week is we used to have a book club where we would get together like once every 3 months and we'd read a book. And we kind of pivoted to an article club because nobody had the attention span to read books anymore. And we wanted to see each other more often than every 3 months. And so we send out an article and we say, hey, everybody read this. And then we'll all get together and we'll discuss it. And a lot of the time the conversation goes towards something else. And like, that's fine. You just want to have sort of a jumping off point for things. One site we use a ton is longreads.com, which collects from around the internet, including the Los Angeles Times, different long form pieces that are often really engaging and very thought provoking, which I really like. We also send around advice columns and fight over the answers. If you don't have a book club already, a very cool thing you can do is join our book club, including tomorrow night at 7 p.m., where we're talking with the journalist Linnell George, the author of A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia Butler, who's discussing that with Julia Wick, who writes our incredible Essential California newsletter, and they are going to discuss Octavia Butler's legacy. And that is free. You can register on Eventbrite. And I think if you attend, you'll learn more about this, but I'm pretty sure there's a way to get a free book. Nothing wrong with that. And they also, what I love about our book club is that you can go on Facebook and join the group there and have the discussion that way too. And it's just a different way to stay connected with people who love to read, which I do. Okay, what I wanted to talk about next is activities, things that are a little more active. Recipe parties are so super fun, especially with the holidays coming up. The host sends out a recipe and everybody goes and gets the ingredients ahead of time. And then you just, you set up your laptop in your kitchen and you bake cookies together. And you're not together to taste them, but you do get to all taste them at the end, which is really the ultimate goal. And then if it's adults, you can try making fancy cocktails together. Also very fun. Another popular pandemic activity. There's also, these are so great if you're doing it with kids, if you want to hang out with your niece and nephew or your grandkids, or you're getting together, any kind of like intergenerational gathering. Everybody gets the same Lego set or craft set and just does it together. And again, just like having dinner together, it's something where you're not feeling pressure to look into the camera and make conversation the entire time, which I think makes a big difference and makes it a lot more comfortable for people. On the left is a Lego recreation of the wedding, the royal wedding in 2011. I don't think you need to get that intense. I think there are less intense Lego sets out there, and I would recommend that. I love karaoke, and if you go on YouTube, you can just search song title karaoke version and find basically anything. You just join a Zoom. You can pick a theme for the night, like 70s music or holiday songs. You can all sing together. One person can go at a time. It's, who cares if you sound bad? Like, that's what karaoke is. And unfortunately, getting together in a small enclosed space and singing loudly is not a thing we're going to all be able to do soon. And so this is a very good version of that. This is one I learned about on Twitter that is so much fun. It's a scavenger hunt, but that you're all doing separately. And so the host makes a list ahead of time, and then they read out what the thing is, and everybody has like 30 seconds to go and find it. So you start easy, and you're like, a penny, a roll of toilet paper, and everybody comes back, and you get to keep going if you find the object, and you're out if you don't find it. And then you can get harder, and it can be like you have to find a mug with writing on it, or a sock that's not white. And then the winner is whoever makes it as far as possible through the list and is able to find all the items. I think during the beginning of the pandemic, 1,000 people wrote articles on how to have game nights, but game nights are still extremely fun. And so we're going to talk about some different ideas for game nights. Things like conversation games, they're not quite games. If you look here, things like the Hooga game and How Well Do You Know Me, these are basically conversation starters. And so it's not a game with an objective or like a thing that you're playing, but it's just different ideas, different ways to get the conversation going and learn more about each other. It's also, I love playing trivia games. And so things, even just like Trivial Pursuit, or here's another one, I should have known that. Again, these are just like fun things to do. You just want to be having fun. You think about that definition of fun, and you think about forgetting about yourself for a minute. You think about being totally absorbed in an activity. And for me, that's getting very deep into trivia. Another really fun thing to do, pretty much any classic board game, if you Google Monopoly online, if you Google Scrabble online, you will find an online version, and you can send a link and invite someone else to play. These are also games where if you both own a Monopoly board, you can play it. It's just like chess by mail, but you're in separate houses, which I guess is what chess by mail is. So it's exactly like chess by mail. And then games like Scattergories, if you've ever played it before, there's a list of categories, and then everybody has to write down, it's timed, and then you write down the answers that are all starting with the same letter. And that's something that's super easy to adapt to Zoom. You can write them all on a Google Doc, or even put them in an email to everyone, and then one person picks a letter and then sets a timer, and then you play, and then you compare your answers. There are a lot of games like this that just get adapted really easily and that are still really fun to play on Zoom. And then there are games that are designed specifically to be played online. And a really great one is Jackbox games. We're going to send you a cheat sheet at the end of this that has links to a lot of the things that we talked about, including links to the Jackbox game. So you're going to get all that good stuff. With Jackbox games, what you do is one person sets it up and shares their screen. And then everybody else can join. They can either go on the computer, or all they need to have is their phone. And then you just answer, you get a room code, and then you answer that, and the game pops up on the phone screen, and you play it from your phone, and you can do that from anywhere. There are a couple versions of the game down here. There's Quiplash. There's one called Murder Mystery Dinner Party, where if you lose, you die. These are more like 14 and over games. Not great for super little kids, but I put multiplayer online games here. If there are any kids or teenagers in your family, they will have ideas for some online games that you could play. And when I looked at this online, there are just so many articles. If you Google multiplayer online games for all ages, so many fun things that are out there. I want to talk a little bit about gathering ideas that are more relaxing. So again, something we've talked about a ton here is stuff where there's less pressure on you to be making conversation the whole time. So one thing you can do is watch parties. I read an article in the New York Times recently that said that rewatching old movies is actually good for your mental health, and we could all use that these days. You can use something like Teleplay, which is a Chrome browser extension, but that's frankly a little complicated. And what me and my friends do is we start a Zoom on the laptop, and then we put the laptop on the coffee table, and then we turn on the TV and we say, okay, start on three. 1, 2, 3, play. And then we mute ourselves so that we're not hearing the other person's audio the whole time. And then if you want to, if you're watching an old movie and you don't care if you talk over it, you can unmute yourself and talk and make comments, or you can just watch it at the same time. Me and my friends watched the entire Lord of the Rings series this way, and it was great. And I also have a standing group where we get together on Thursday nights and watch RuPaul's Drag Race on WoW Presents, which is also excellent. But things like that, where you're still talking and connecting and seeing each other, which is so different from just, emailing or calling. This is something I learned, this phrase parallel socializing, from somebody I interviewed, Captain Awkward, Jennifer Peepus. She writes that's the name of her advice column. It's being together without feeling the pressure to carry on a conversation. So this is things like, toward the beginning of the pandemic, me and some friends would get on our Switch, or the Nintendo Switches, and play Animal Crossing separately. But we'd all be on the Zoom together and be able to talk about what we were doing and show each other what was going on. But it wasn't as much pressure as being on the call the whole time. This is also stuff like doing puzzles, doing gardening, planting stuff. I had a Zoom call with a friend where we just repotted our plants separately in our gardens and talked about them. Things like crossword puzzles, this is great for. I love the New York Times crossword puzzle app. Even just like knitting or crafts. The whole idea here is that you're together without having to be actively conversing. And I know I feel like I'm repeating that a lot while I'm saying it, but I really do think there is a lot of pressure, especially in a time where we all don't have maybe a ton to talk about. I know I called my mom recently and we talked for a few minutes, and then it was like, well, I'm home all day working, and you're home all day working, and that's it. And I haven't gone anywhere, and I've done nothing, and it's great. And so the reason we're presenting all these ideas is that it just gives you a way to be with them in a way that's more low pressure. Okay, so we are going to go on to our final poll question here. Liza, if we could pull those up, thank you. Are you planning to visit family or have people over for the holidays? Yes? No? I'm still not sure. I want to, but they don't, or they want to, but I don't. And then everybody who is on the webinar will have a chance to answer that, and we'll look back at those. So I want to talk about, if you are getting together with people in person, how to do that safely. Is it safe to get together for Thanksgiving or Christmas? The answer is not really. If you have a pandemic bubble of people that you've already seen and shared germs with, you can get together any day for dinner with those people if you want. But in terms of traveling, in terms of adding new households to your pandemic bubble, the safest bet is to stick to the people you've already been seeing. I know I already talked about this, but this is really probably the only holiday season where we have to do this. And so I would really encourage you to think of this as a one-time thing. This is an opportunity to do something different and make some new memories and look back on that kooky year where you all didn't see each other, but did get to wear your pajamas all day on Thanksgiving. If you do gather with people, we're going to talk about what some of the public safety and health guidelines are. People from other states, if they are visiting you or if you are visiting them in another state, are advised to quarantine for 14 days. And so if you're planning to do it before Thanksgiving, you're already late. Eat outside, limit the meal to 2 hours. Attendance should be limited to 3 households. And that really means 3 separate households. That doesn't mean like your sister-in-law and your brother and their daughter who just came back from college. That's 2 households. That's not 1 household. So pretty strict. The tables need to be spaced out at least 6 feet apart, preferably further. 6 feet is like a good starting point. You can't have any shared food. You can't have like a potluck. You can't have everybody gets up and gets all the food from the same thing. It really needs to be, it's better if it's more like a potluck that everybody brings their own food, frankly. Everybody has to wear masks when they aren't eating. You have to wash your hands very frequently, and no hugs are allowed. This is a photo from one of my colleague Bonnie McCarthy's stories about how to set up a backyard Thanksgiving. And I am glad that this is an option for people who can do this safely. But to me, this looks very sad. And to me, I mean, we canceled Thanksgiving with my in-laws, and it was really hard because I love seeing them for Thanksgiving. But instead of getting together in person, we are going to go on Zoom, and we are going to do our favorite Thanksgiving activity, which is to watch the National Dog Show together. And so we still get to keep up some of the same traditions, but in a way that's really safe for everyone, which makes everybody happy and pretty relieved. somebody on Twitter said, I mentioned on Twitter that I wasn't going to go home to visit my parents for Christmas. And somebody was like, that's silly. You never know which Christmas is going to be your last. Go see your mom. But like, that's true. We never know which Christmas will be our last. But if I travel to another state and see my parents, that rapidly increases the chances that that will be the last Christmas that I see them. And so, yeah, I am doing what will statistically give me the best chance of getting a lot more Christmases with them, which is not seeing them for this one, even though it's sad and I'd really like to hug my mom, but we're going to do some fun stuff. I spoke to etiquette experts and public health experts about how to say no to things, because I know it is very awkward and difficult and you don't want to seem like the one who's rocking the boat or being stubborn. Some advice I got was to keep it short. You just say, I'm so sorry, we won't be able to make it this year. Once you start justifying or defending or coming up with reasons or sounding judgmental of their reasons for doing it, that's where things get really complicated. No is a complete sentence, and no thank you an especially complete sentence. Some things you can do instead is send gifts and plan online activities, like a lot of the ones we've talked about, and we're going to talk about some really fun holiday-specific ones. This was something that came up a lot, which was to expect some hurt feelings and disappointment. You're doing this for everyone's safety, which is good, but also not particularly fun and pretty disappointing for everyone. But it's the safest thing you can do, and saying no without hurting anyone's feelings shouldn't be the goal. Being safe should be the goal. This was a great piece of advice that I heard from one person. If you do say, no, I'm sorry, I can't make it to your Christmas party, don't post photos of yourself at another Christmas party. Even if it's with your own little pandemic bubble or whatever, it still seems pretty rude. I wanted to talk about some holiday-specific ideas because I know they're coming up. These are going to be a lot of kind of like variations on what we've talked about so far. But before I do, I want to look at the results of that final poll. Liza, can we pull those up? Okay, are you planning to visit family or have people over for the holidays? 47% of you said no. 31% said yes. 11% said I'm still not sure. 4% said I want to, but they don't. 7% said they want to, but I don't. So, okay, that's good. I mean, the main concern is when you are having gatherings of 10 people or more, or having lots of people coming in from different states. And I really just want to emphasize to everybody watching this how important it is to be as safe as possible this year. So let's talk about some ideas that don't involve risking coronavirus with our loved ones. So these are, like I said, these are like variations on the ideas, things we already talked about. So if you're going to get together, like sharing a family recipe or baking holiday cookies together, I spoke to an expert actually just earlier today about loneliness and social connection. And she said some of the types of activities that abate those feelings the most, that really make people feel connected even if they aren't with each other in person, is reminiscence. And something like reminiscing about family traditions, like making recipes, is really, really powerful, and not just because you get to eat something at the end. Set up a time for a holiday toast. If people are burned out on these Zooms or don't want to join a long video call or don't have time because they're busy with what their family is doing or whatever, just set up some quick time for everybody to get together on the Zoom, see each other, make eye contact through the camera, and raise a glass. Another thing that the expert I talked to today talked about was how gratitude decreases loneliness and increases our feeling of social connection. And so for something like Thanksgiving, I know in non-pandemic years, my family would go around and we'd all say what we're thankful for. That's something you can still do. And I know this is a challenging year to feel thankful for things, but we're all still here, and I feel really thankful for that. Another thing you can do is have everybody plan the same meal and eat it together, or everybody order from the same restaurant if you're all in the same area, so that you're still getting these shared things that you're doing together. We talked about karaoke. You can do like a Christmas song sing-along. You can just look up whatever your favorite holiday song is, karaoke version. I guarantee YouTube has a video for you with all the lyrics and the background music. You can do Secret Santa. You can have everybody send things without putting who the receiver is, and then everybody joins the Zoom to open them and guess who they came from. Or you can just send presents and set up some time, at 10 a.m. on Christmas, we're all going to jump on and open our gifts at the same time. In terms of more relaxed activities to do, think back on that idea of parallel socializing, something like decorating the house for the holidays at the same time, where you're both putting up the lights and unwrapping the ornaments and going through the family decorations. You can also, like I said, that's where I forgot to put the National Dog Show on here. You can plan to be on a video call while either watching the same event or watching holiday movies together. You can say, we're going to log on and watch It's a Wonderful Life together. And then things like holiday puzzles or holiday crafts. are really fun things where you can do them online together. And so those are the end of my ideas for connecting with each other. And now I would like to give everybody a chance to ask some questions if you are here on the webinar, and my colleague Sam is going to ask them on your behalf.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if I'm quite on screen yet. Hi, I'm Sam. I'm the Audience Engagement Director here at the LA Times, and I work closely with Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Great job. I learned a lot.
Sam?
I actually want to preempt with a question of my own, a little bit off topic, but I encourage everyone to keep adding questions as we talk. I'm looking and I'll ask your question if you share them. But Jessica, I hope I'm not revealing a little too much here, but I know that your sister got married this year and showed the whole thing on Zoom. And I wonder if you can kind of talk through how that went, kind of any tips that you learned from that experience that might be applicable as people, try to substitute in-person special events for virtual ones.
I would love to. So my sister Charlotte is amazing. She lives in New York City and she's an emergency room doctor. And so she's been very fortunate. She has not been sick, but she has been working very, very hard and was planning a really beautiful wedding out here in Santa Barbara that unfortunately we postponed. And then now it's sort of, it's all kind of up in the air. Maybe next year, we hope. But so she really wanted to get married. And so she did a Zoom wedding, and it was really weird for me wearing like shorts and being in my own house watching my sister get married on Zoom. But there were a couple of technical difficulties that perhaps we could have preempted. One was that she accidentally set up the free version of the Zoom meeting. And so which means it could only last for 40 minutes. Fortunately, the groom moved through his vows very quickly, and we were able to get to the end of the ceremony before the call cut off. Another issue we had is that my uncle joined halfway through the ceremony and started loudly talking about the chicken sandwich she wanted to order for lunch that day. And a good way to solve that is when you are hosting one of these on Zoom, you can mute other people, which is what we did.
That is a good tip. We have a question from Jacqueline here. Thank you for your question, Jacqueline. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to drop them in here. We'll talk and answer them as best we can. Jacqueline has a question that is definitely, I think, relatable given the recent election. When you have a relative that's disagreeable, or you are the relative, how do you go about just kind of keeping from infighting during a Zoom, since it's supposed to be kind of a happy, fun meeting? Any tips for that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One thing I was talking to that loneliness researcher today about was, she was like, it's so funny that people are like, oh no, we can't get together for the holidays this year, because a lot of people are like, oh no, we have to get together for the holidays this year. So a lot of people certainly do have a difficult family member. I wish I had a single solution to getting along with disagreeable family that worked in all scenarios. I don't. I think if you're planning to get together over Zoom, you don't have to tell the disagreeable family member. You can just feel like we're not doing anything. Like I think people put a lot of expectations on themselves around the holidays, even in non-pandemic years. And I think if you have somebody who is going to start a fight or be ugly at a time when things were already so hard for everyone, just don't invite them. Just don't tell them there was a Zoom. And if you are the disagreeable relative, I would really encourage you to relax and try to embrace the spirit of the season of being thankful that we are all just here to be on this Zoom together.
And Jacqueline, who asked the question, thanks again, Jacqueline, pointed out again that there's always the mute button, right?
Yes, that's also very true as well. Yeah, if your relative has too much wine in their own home and starts ranting and you're the host of the meeting, yes, make liberal use of the mute button.
That's a really good tip. I wonder if you have any ideas for how to spend these meetings, these holidays, with children in particular, who seem to be a lot better at Zoom now that they've, a large portion of them have been going to school via Zoom. They're kind of used to adults talking at them. I wonder if you know of any like games or fun activities for kids.
Yeah, that's one thing where I think something like doing a craft set together or a Lego set, and that's something where the kid will be a lot more involved if you let them be involved with the process. If you say, here's 3 different Lego sets they could get, or here's 5 different crafts we could try, you pick your favorite. I'm going to send it to you on Amazon, and then I'm going to send myself one, and we're going to do it together, because then they feel like they're part of the process. I mean, something that kids deal with a lot in pandemic times and in not is not feeling empowered in situations with adults, which is very difficult. It's hard to deal with being small and having no power. and so letting them get involved in this way is a good way to get them engaged with it even before you're on the Zoom call together.
I love that idea. Yeah. I mean, I would like to do Legos anyway, so maybe that's like a hangout that you and I can have later, Jessica.
I'd love to recreate the royal wedding with you over Zoom.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. We should end this so we can get to that. I've got one more question, and that is, you mentioned in an article that you wrote earlier this year and that I shared in the chat, kind of the prep work involved for Zoom. I wonder if you've got any experience or any tips for kind of what that's like, setting someone up with Zoom who's maybe never done it before, or Google Hangouts or whatever it is, and kind of your process there.
Yeah, I think the most important thing you can do is be patient. If it's a relative who has not used that, who is not super technically savvy, I think it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to feel flustered. It's easy to feel like they're not getting this. It's not even worth doing it. But I think it really is worth doing. And I think it's about being patient and understanding that not everybody is on Zoom all day, every day, like some of us are. And so I would say, you would extend the same kind of loving patience you would have for them if you saw them in person. And maybe email them a YouTube ahead of time, just so they can get, some pointers.
In your article, you wrote, call them ahead of time and walk them through it. I think, read that article, everybody, and there's some good tips in there.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it too, especially if it is something like a wedding or a Thanksgiving where it's time sensitive and you think they're going to have an issue. A really wonderful and loving thing that you can do for them is say, hey, let's do a quick test call. Let's get you set up. Let's get your lighting set up. And then when it's time for the actual call, you just click the button to join and you'll be ready to go.
I love that tip. What do you think of, we just got a question from Marcia who said, some of my family lives in rural areas where internet is spotty. Do you think that that phone conferencing things like freeconferencecall.com are as effective as a video chat? And kind of, do you have any strategies for how to make those as meaningful as a video?
Sure. I think phone calls can definitely be as meaningful as a video. And I think there are ways to adapt a lot of these things to phone calls. The thing is, when there are that many people talking and you can't use visual cues to see who is trying to speak, you really have to limit the size of the call. I mean, it's the same thing, the inverse relationship of the amount of time you are planning to be on versus the number of people who are on the call. And so if you do want to do a quick conference call with everyone for Thanksgiving, say, okay, I'm going to call out households and everybody go around and say what they're thankful for. Say you love them, say you'll see them next year's Thanksgiving and hang up. Versus if it's a smaller group, it's a lot easier to be on a phone call and not feel like you're all talking over each other the whole time.
That's really helpful. And Marta asks, how do you have dinner with no shared food? Maybe you can explain kind of what you mean by the parallel experiences that you're talking about.
Oh, well, with parallel socializing, I was talking about if you're like eating in your own house. But in terms of shared food, like if you're doing backyard Thanksgiving, basically what you would want to do is plate everyone's food ahead of time. You just can't all be going up to the same buffet style thing and spooning stuff out of the same bowl and breathing on the shared food. I would say whoever's cooking has to separate the meals ahead of time, or you say everybody bring their own food in Tupperware or whatever, and then you bring it and you all eat it at the same time.
Right. And you also mentioned how, you and I could order from the same restaurant, the same meal from the same restaurant, and then, get on a video conference and eat it.
Yeah, or I'd say, here's the turkey recipe I'm using and the sweet potato recipe I'm using and the cranberry upside down cake for dessert. We're all going to make them and then we're all going to get to eat them at the same time. And so it's creating these shared experiences that you can have even though you're not in the same place together.
That's really cool. Well, I mean, I think the last question is, what is your favorite thing that you talked about as far as like activities that you suggest? What have you tried and what have you liked?
Honestly, my favorite things are the watch parties. I treasure the long weekend me and my friends spent watching all the Lord of the Rings movies together. It was so, because they're movies we've all seen before and we love and we know what's going to happen. And if one of us talks over it, like we know what's going on. But it was so funny being like, I'm on my couch and they're on their couch, but I can see them right there. And so it's like they're on the couch next to me. For me, that's an experience where I really felt close to my friends and felt like we were able to have a good conversation and be together in a different way.
That's so great. Well, that's all we had for questions. Thanks everyone for sending in your questions. Jessica, I'll toss it back to you.
Thank you. So you are all going to get a PDF that has all the links to the stuff we talked about. It's got all the ideas that we talked about. It's going to have links to my articles that have a lot more technical tips for like getting set up technologically, that stuff that can help. And it's also got my Twitter address and my email address. And so you can hit me up if you have any more questions. And I think that's about it. And thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you all have a really, really wonderful holiday season. I am looking very forward to it.